Happiness is a state of mind or feeling such as contentment, satisfaction, pleasure, or joy. A variety of philosophical, religious, psychological, and biological approaches have been taken to defining happiness and identifying its sources. Philosophers and religious thinkers have often defined happiness in terms of living a good life, or flourishing, rather than simply as an emotion. Happiness in this older sense was used to translate the Greek eudaimonia, and is still used in virtue ethics. In everyday speech today, however, terms such as well-being or quality of life are usually used to signify the classical meaning, and happiness is reserved for the felt experience or experiences that philosophers historically called pleasure. Happiness forms a central theme of Buddhist teachings, which focuses on obtaining freedom from suffering by following the Eightfold Path. In the Buddhist view, ultimate happiness is only achieved by overcoming craving in all forms. Aristotle saw happiness as the virtuous activity of the soul in accordance with reason, or the practice of virtue. In Catholicism, the ultimate end of human existence consists in felicity, or blessed happiness, described by the 13th century philosopher-theologian Thomas Aquinas as a beatific vision of God's essence in the next life. One psychological approach, positive psychology, describes happiness as consisting of positive emotions and positive activities. In most religions, happiness is the eternal reward for those who meet certain criteria. While direct measurement of happiness is difficult, tools such as the Oxford Happiness Inventory have been developed by researchers. Physiological correlates to happiness can be measured through a variety of techniques, and survey research can be based on self-reported happiness levels. Research has identified a number of correlates with happiness. These include religious involvement, parenthood, marital status, age, income, and proximity to other happy people. Happiness economics suggests that measures of public happiness should be used to supplement more traditional economic measures when evaluating the success of public policy. Biological approach. The evolutionary perspective offers an alternative approach to understand what happiness or quality of life is about. Briefly, the questions to be answered are: what features are included in the brain that allows humans to distinguish between positive and negative states of mind, and how do these features improve the survivability of humans? Answering these questions points towards an understanding of what happiness is about and how to best exploit the capacities of the brain with which humans are endowed. The perspective is presented in detail by the evolutionary biologist Bjorn Grind in his book Darwinian Happiness, as well as in a more formal way. Philosophical views. The Chinese Confucian thinker Mencius, who 2,300 years ago sought to give advice to the ruthless political leaders of the Warring States period, was convinced that the mind played a mediating role between the lesser self and the greater self, and that getting the priorities right between these two would lead to sagehood. He argued that if we did not feel satisfaction or pleasure in nourishing one's vital force with righteous deeds, that force would shrivel up. More specifically, he mentions the experience of intoxicating joy if one celebrates the practice of the great virtues, especially through music. About 100 years later, the Hindu thinker Patanjali, author of the Yoga Sutras, wrote quite exhaustively on the psychological and ontological roots of bliss. In the Nicomachean Ethics, written in 350 BCE, Aristotle stated that happiness is the only emotion that humans desire for its own sake. He observed that men sought riches, or honor, or health, not for their own sake, but in order to be happy. Note that eudaimonia, the term we translate as happiness, is for Aristotle an activity, rather than an emotion or a state. Happiness is characteristic of a good life, that is, a life in which a man or woman fulfills human nature in an excellent way. People have a set of purposes which are typically human. They belong to our nature. The happy person is virtuous, meaning he or she has outstanding abilities and emotional tendencies which allow him or her to fulfill our common human ends. For Aristotle, then, happiness is the virtuous activity of the soul in accordance with reason. Happiness is the practice of virtue. Many ethicists make arguments for how humans should behave, either individually or collectively, based on the resulting happiness of such behavior. Utilitarians, such as John Stuart Mill and Jeremy Bentham, advocated the greatest happiness principle as a guide for ethical behavior. Religious and spiritual views. Explanations of happiness in mystical traditions, especially in advanced spiritual techniques, are related to full balance, conjunction, union, secret marriage of so-called inner energy lines, energy channels of a soul, or deepest dimension of the human. Nadi, in ancient Indian, Gaimokavim, in Hebrew, pillars, columns, Gnostikafis or caduceus. In balanced state, two main lines, left and right, Adu and Pingala, form a third line, called Shushumna. Speaking technically, full activity of this third or central line is happiness. Left and right lines include all aspects of normal human life, sleep and awake, body and mind, physical and spiritual, and so on. To attain balanced state of these two lines is a main task of life, a paradoxical result of all kinds of activities and endeavors combined with full relaxation or tranquility at the same time. In Catholicism, the ultimate end of human existence consists in felicity, Latin equivalent to the Greek eudaimonia, or blessed happiness, described by the 13th century philosopher-theologian Thomas Aquinas as a beatific vision of God's essence in the next life. According to Augustine's Confessions, he lived much of his life without God. He sinned much and recognized his sinfulness. As a youth, he sinned for its own sake, and later, in the pursuit of a perceived good. When he lost a dear friend to death, it troubled him a lot, and he turned to God for answers. He turned to God to find true happiness, and was converted to Christianity. He found that true happiness can only come from a relationship with God and appreciating God's creation for his sake, and not its own. Happiness forms a central theme of Buddhist teachings. For ultimate freedom from suffering, the Eightfold Path leads its practitioner to nirvana, a state of everlasting peace. Ultimate happiness is only achieved by overcoming craving in all forms. More mundane forms of happiness, such as acquiring wealth and maintaining good friendships, are also recognized as worthy goals for lay people. Buddhism also encourages the generation of loving kindness and compassion, the desire for the happiness and welfare of all beings. According to the Buddha, mind is the forerunner of states of existence. Mind is chief, and those states are caused by the mind. If one speaks and acts with a pure mind, surely happiness will follow like one's own shadow. In Buddhism, the third of the Four Noble Truths states to eliminate suffering, eliminate craving, thus establishing the happiness as beyond material and emotional possession and attainable only through an attentive practice leading to extinguishing of craving and aversion. In economic thought, common market health measures such as GDP and GNP have been used as a measure of successful policy. Some economists argue that although on average richer nations tend to be happier than poor nations, beyond an average GDP capita of about $15,000 a year, studies indicate the average income in a nation makes little difference to the average happiness of the people in the nation. It has been argued that happiness measures could be used not as a replacement for more traditional measures, but as a supplement. The accuracy of this Easterlin paradox is disputed by other economists.